All right, so today we are going to pick up with talking about some of the specific components of intelligence or things that people have talked about with intelligence, and those are creativity, emotional intelligence, and then also kind of the brain and what the brain has to do with intelligence. And some of the studies in our more recent delves with brain scanning into the brain. But first, we're going to talk about creativity. So a guy named Robert Sternberg was one of the people that really focused in on creativity. And like we talked about yesterday, current research is actually finding that creativity is one of the best predictors and or signs of a high intelligence. And we're finding huge positive correlations between people who score highly on creativity tests and people who, and what their actual IQ is on standardized IQ tests. So what are these 5 components that Sternberg had? Well, he talked about expertise, or possessing a well-developed base of knowledge. He talked about imaginative thinking, having the ability to see new perspectives, combinations, and connections. He talked about venturesome personality, tending to seek out new experiences despite risks, ambiguity, I can't say that, and obstacles. Intrinsic motivation, enjoying the pursuit of interests and challenge without needing external direction or rewards. And then creative environment, having support, feedback, encouragement, and time and space to think. So one way to kind of think about these is building blocks, kind of like use the analogy of playing blocks. Okay, so expertise is the way we use the new blocks. You have all these blocks. How do you use them? And do you keep gaining new blocks? Okay, are you constantly seeking out to have the most blocks for any one particular subject and or multiple subjects? Highly creative people also typically tend to be people that want to know a lot about lots of things. And then we have imagination. So when you have all these blocks, how are you trying to fit them together? Okay, what kind of, are you always kind of constantly looking at new ways that you can build the blocks and new combinations that you can put together and new castles that you can build? And what about this? And how could you add to it? And well, if this block doesn't fit with this block, what would I need to do to make it all fit together? So this highly imaginative thinking. Venturesome personality, trying new things. So when you're building these blocks, are you willing to manipulate and try new things even though there is the potential for failure? When you have your tower that's taller than you ever built it before, are you willing to go one step further despite the fact that you know that the tower might break? So are you really willing to put yourself out there and try new things? Intrinsic motivation. Are you willing to play with the blocks just because you like to play with the blocks? Not because anybody's telling you to play with the blocks, not because you're getting money for playing with the blocks, just because you enjoy playing with them. And then last but not least, the creative environment. Do you have a place where you can sit and play with your blocks as much as you want, with help available if you want it? Do you have some place that's fostering and encouraging you to build the castles and build the bridges and build all these things with your blocks? Okay, so Sternberg, this was kind of his in his research. These are the things that he found of highly creative people. These are the 5 components that all highly creative people have. How many do you have? 1, 2, do you see this? Can you see where maybe you're being held back? Perhaps. And we're going to take some creativity tests in class and talk about some of the specific things with these as well. All right, emotional intelligence. So a guy named Goldman. Yes, Goldman was the person who really started to look at emotional intelligence and started to think about the fact that, okay, so we have these IQs and we have these people that are super smart and can do these things. Well, what about the fact that we live in a society? What about the fact that we are, we are constantly interacting with each other? So he started looking at this idea of emotional intelligence. And he said that our components of emotional intelligence are perceiving emotions, understanding emotions, managing emotions, and using emotions. So perceiving emotions meaning recognizing emotions in facial expressions, stories, and even music. How well can you figure out what is the emotional component of any situation that you are in? Understanding emotions, being able to see blended emotions, and being able to predict emotional states and changes in the self and others. So again, remember, this is not just in others, this is in yourself as well. Do you understand when you feel a certain way? Do you understand when you're conflicted? Do you understand when others are conflicted? And do you understand and can you predict what certain situations are kind of emotions, what certain situations are going to elicit from yourself and others? Managing emotions, modulating and expressing emotions in various situations. So modulating kind of means not letting your emotions get out of control, being able to kind of temper yourself and say, hey, time and place, this is not the time for me to have a hissy fit right now, or this is not the person that I need to speak to out of turn like that. I need to find a different way of expressing myself. Okay, so how well can you manage those? And then using emotions, okay? Using emotions as fuel and motivation for creative and adaptive thinking. So can you use emotions to think creatively? Can you adapt to situations using your emotions? So emotional intelligence, is something that's fairly new, but it's also pretty important because if you really think about it, we all know those people that are very book smart, but are they people smart? Some people kind of refer to emotional intelligence as street smarts or people smarts. How well can you tell when somebody's lying to you? Can you tell when somebody's trying to pull one over on you? Do you know how to adapt yourself to the situation that you're in, and kind of almost change your personality? Maybe typically you're a loud, outgoing, kind of like wear your emotions on your sleeve person, but when you go and you get your first job, do you know that the workplace is not the place to share all of those emotions? And we find that people who have this strong emotional intelligence do tend to succeed better in life. So, for instance, some of the benefits of emotional intelligence, people with high emotional intelligence often have other beneficial traits, such as delayed gratification while pursuing long-term goals. Again, this goes back to the ability to manage your emotions. Yes, you want it, you want it, you want it, but you also know that now is maybe not the best time to get it, and you understand that you will be gratified even when you get it later, so you can wait, you can put it on, the back burner, or you can work towards that goal instead of just, if you can't have it now, I'm never going to have it. And then the level of emotional intelligence, including the skill of reading the emotions of others, correlates with success in career and other social situations. And again, kind of like what we just talked about, you have to be able to know how to act in what different situation. And people that can't do this oftentimes have a hard time in the workplace and other social situations because, you all know that person that is emotionally erratic, somebody who cries at the drop of a hat, even though it's not necessarily the right emotion for the situation. And it is something that's learned. Okay, so with IQ, a lot of the current theories are that we're kind of born. Remember, we talked about that general G. We have that base level based off of our parents. Well, with emotional intelligence, it is something that can be learned. It is something that you can try and actively engage in building your emotional intelligence. All right, and then the last piece we're going to talk about today is brain anatomy and intelligence. I kind of mentioned yesterday when in class that brain size, there is some slight positive correlation between brain size and IQ score. Okay, so when we study the brains of geniuses, what do we see? Well, we found this correlation between overall brain size. Okay, there does seem to be a slight positive correlation between overall brain size and geniuses. The size of certain brain regions, such as the parietal lobe. Okay, we find for whatever reason that the parietal lobe tends to be a little bit larger in people with that are geniuses. High brain activity in the frontal and the parietal lobes. Extra gray matter, okay, or brain cell bodies as seen as the brain surface area, the convolutions. So all of the wrinkles and the extra stuff, all that stuff, we see more of it. They just seem to have a higher surface area and more indents and squiggles. And then also extra white matter, which are the axons, leading to the high connectivity among the different regions. So people with these genius brain levels seem to not only have a bigger brain, but they also seem to have more of the cortex area, more axons, more connections, more neural activity. So their brains tend to work faster and they have more area for those connections and things like that to be made. Which is one of the things that we are starting to see, especially with those new fMRIs that are super fast, and we can see these connections. Their connections just seem to go so much faster, and they just seem to have more of them. And again, frontal lobe has a lot to do with our thinking, planning, judgment, and higher level things. So perhaps, you know, these people are the ones that are able to make connections quicker, make connections faster, have stronger connections, make connections between more things, which then the more connections you have, the more you're able to access those things, and along those lines. But again, we're just kind of starting to really study this idea of the genius brain, because one, there's not many super geniuses out there, and then two, obviously our brain imaging techniques are newer. All right, so that's it for today. Next time we are going to talk about some of the specifics of how we assess intelligence.